Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Wander to the Edge. It is another great edition of this fantastic show that we love so much. And my name is Adam Asher, and I am from The Edge of Adventure.
I'm Zan. I'm from Where Gals Wander.
And you can find out more at wheregalswander.com. So it's a beautiful Saturday here, Zan. Look, I'm
Yeah,
outside.
who let you out of the house? Who
I
unlocked that door?
right. I don't know, but I'm never going back inside.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful day. Great to be outside, and we've all, been affected by the shutdowns and sort of the shift in the way we've lived life this year. And we've all adapted, but I think it has affected us in ways maybe we don't even fully realize or fully understand. I think it's good to get outside. It's
it
good to
is.
get out, see the world, and I figured, hey, on this Saturday, I'm going to get back to our roots because when we started this, Zan, which was back when,
In May, we were in our backyards.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I figured, you know what, I'm gonna get back to my roots today, and take it outside and see if we can do a podcast from outside if that's not against the rules. But anyway, everybody, great to have you. Thanks for joining us. Very special day. We love this program. We love what it provides for us. This great opportunity to meet new people, meet friends perhaps that we've known for a long time, but we've never fully met them and had the opportunity to get to know them in a very real way. So that's what today's about. And as always, we have a great guest for you. And today, in particular, a very inspirational one.
Well, it's funny that you talked about just getting outside and the healing elements about being outdoors and getting back to travel, even if it's to your own back porch. And Pat Wetzel from Cancer Road Trip is going to tell us a little bit more about her journey. She has an amazing story around being diagnosed with an incurable lymphoma to selling her house, taking it on the road, and developing her whole platform into something that really gives back. It's an amazing story. I can't wait to chat with her.
And that's coming up next, right here on this Saturday on
Wander,
Wander to
Wander to the Edge.
Pat Wetzel, welcome to the program. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We really appreciate you taking the time today. And as we mentioned in the open for the show, this is a day, I think, to be inspired. And your platform and all that you do and have done is inspirational. We appreciate you.
Well, thank you. That you're very kind. Quite honestly, it was a road trip I did not plan. The things just happened along the way.
Well, those are some of the best road trips that happen, is just when we get what I call unstuck. Something happens that pushes us into a completely different direction we didn't want, we didn't expect, but often leads to a beautiful journey, I guess, to a certain extent. So, what, Pat, maybe start off just by telling us how your journey started.
Yeah, a short version of a long story. In 2009, I was diagnosed with supposedly incurable cancer. I was told I would be in and out of treatment for the rest of my life. I spent about 5 years going through a series of treatments, and I did get a remission. I was very frustrated during this period because this was back in 2009. There was very little information about what created health, much less anti-cancer health. So I started a website called Anti-Cancer Club, and I really built it. I think we had about 40 million impressions in 2016 on Twitter alone. And the reason I did that was that I had designed a technology platform that modeled and rewarded human compassion through long-term illness, because it's very hard to stay connected when you're not well. I'd gone down to Silicon Valley to raise money for it, got some interest. I needed to do a beta platform. I had my lawyers drop contracts, hired a company, gave them all the information, and I waited. And I waited, and I emailed, and I called, and they refused to respond. So I got my lawyers on it. And finally, they came back to me and said, well, they've taken all your intellectual property. They've registered it with the US Patent Office as their own. And by the way, your only option is to sue them. Intellectual property theft is pretty common. It'll cost you about $500,000, if not more, and take 3 years of your life. And by the way, there's no guaranteed outcome. This happens all the time. I was stunned, to say the least. I had to lay people off. One person had to file for bankruptcy. And I was so stressed over the whole thing that my hair was falling out from just stress, not chemo this time. And I was vomiting blood. So I went to see my oncologist, who came up with 6 different tests and 10 different things it could be. And he never asked me a thing about what was going on in my life. And I just sat there and I thought, I'm not doing this again. And I left and I put my house up for sale and put everything in storage, and I hit the road. And I started another blog, Cancer Road Trip. And somewhere along the way, it occurred to me, if I could travel to heal, why can't others?
So that's where you came up with this definition of a traveler. And tell us a little bit more about what that means to you, how you define a traveler.
Well, traveler really refers to the trips we give others. Every quarter, we give 7 people an amazing bucket list trip somewhere in the world. Our first trip has been postponed to the fall of 2021 because of COVID. But trips would be like Kilimanjaro, ballooning over the Serengeti, Machu Picchu. And we captured it all on film, both for education and inspiration for the entire cancer community, because people post-treatment really stand at the end of a precipice. They can't go back. They can't really go forward. If they go forward, there's no path. Is it a dark night of the soul, or is it a pivot point into a more conscious world? And obviously, I believe it's the latter. So the goal with the Cancer Road Trip film series is to capture people and their perspectives on these amazing trips that force them to voyage both within and to new places around the world.
Pat, what happens to the person who gets that news when they are perhaps living their life, everything's fine, they're worried about other things that soon feel insignificant, when they get the news that their life has changed, forever changed, and there's a lot of uncertainty ahead? As someone who has been through it and someone who helps people through that, describe for us what that feels like and what the challenges are.
It's a total game. Well, I shouldn't say it's a total game changer. I should say everybody responds in their own way. Some people will try to ignore it and just go back to the way life was. I think that's difficult to do, and I think that there's a psychological price for psychological and spiritual price actually for doing that. I think for a lot of people, there's a period of just disbelief. Everything's just incongruent. You get move forward into treatment. It's a very difficult time. But I think the most difficult aspect of it is actually post-treatment, because you go through this period of intense doctor's appointments and tests and everything else, and all of a sudden it's done and boom, it's like you fall off a cliff. There's nothing there. They say, we'll see you in 3 months for a scan. That's it. It's just an amazing experience. And one of the things that motivates me for Cancer Road Trip is that everybody goes through this, and you watch people reinventing the wheel again and again and again. And yet that emotional and experiential aspect of this is common to all of us all around the world. So why don't we share our stories and share our experiences? Because a story allows somebody to drop in wherever they are in their own story. They may be just beginning. They may be a year out. They may be 4 years out. They may be ready to heal in 3 months. They may be ready to heal in 3 years. The individual can drop in wherever they want. And I think that's a really important aspect of creating a film series like this, in that we can reach people wherever they are. And it's up to them then to decide what they want to do with it.
Pat, as these people tell their stories about living with that level of uncertainty, about what will happen next, what happens when you fall off that cliff, your blog, cancerroadtrip.com, has won several awards. You have your docuseries. You just started a new podcast, Bump in the Road. And right before we began, turning on the cameras, we started talking about how COVID kind of pushed us into these new ventures. And share with us, that time of uncertainty, even with COVID, and you had to postpone your own travel, how you started Bump in the Road.
Well, after being thoroughly depressed for 3 weeks, I decided I had to do something. And, I built this audience and I had to keep it engaged. And I thought, okay, I was going to do a podcast eventually anyway, but I thought my podcast would be more oriented towards travel adventures. But obviously, that's off the table right now. So I thought about it and I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to talk to people from all walks of life, not just the cancer community, about how they use difficult circumstances as a pivot point into a more conscious or meaningful life. And so that's the essence behind Bump in the Road. And oh my gosh, I have interviewed so many amazing people. I have interviews stacked up until almost the end of the year now. I've interviewed mountain climbers. I've interviewed people with cancer, journalists, adventurers. The stories are just incredible.
Speaking of stories, I know that some of your travel guides that partner with you
Mhm.
also have some amazing stories. I saw on your website you had someone with one lung who had climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Tell us a little bit, like, how did you form this community and this business that you have? How do you even get started with that?
Well, it came out of my own cancer experience, really. And I thought I would hate social media. This is back in 2009 or so. And I dragged myself reluctantly into it. And it turns out to have been a great experience. I have met people all over the world I never would have met without social media. And the person you're talking about is Sean Swarner, who's involved with Cancer Road Trip too. Sean is amazing. He's been on Bump in the Road. He had 2 different types of childhood cancer, either of which should have killed him. And he survived. And he spent a few years in his young adulthood trying to figure out, what do I want to do? A very typical response to such an extraordinary set of events. And one day he decided he would climb Everest with one lung. So he did it. And after Everest, he climbed all the major peaks on all the major continents. He went to the South Pole. 2 years ago, he went to the North Pole and did an award-winning documentary on that. And he's climbed Kilimanjaro, oh my gosh, I'm going to say 30 or 40 times. As a matter of fact, we were talking recently, and we have to wait to see what happens with COVID. But we want our first trip to be Tanzania. And part of the group is going to do Kilimanjaro, and part of the group is going to be ballooning over the Serengeti.
That sounds amazing.
Well, and I think there'll be interesting things that come out of it. For each trip, we try to find things that challenge people. I mean, the mountain climb is an obvious metaphor, but so is ballooning. It involves exposure, heights, trust, all sorts of different elements. So we try to incorporate experiences that translate into this cancer road trip, if you will, of trying to transform into being your best self.
So, Pat, I wanted to ask on behalf of the audience, who should join you for one of these trips? You call them cancer road trips. Who is this invitation being extended to join you?
That's a great question. We have 2 primary groups: people who are post-treatment in cancer. So our trips might focus on a type of cancer, lung cancer, breast cancer, or a group, veterans with cancer. There are a lot of different ways we can do that. We might focus on an idea like meditation, Ayurvedic medicine, mountain climbing, the metaphor of a mountain. But we also include caregivers in our group. And we do that because caregivers are such an integral part of the cancer experience. They do so many things for so many people, and often they're forgotten about. I had a friend of mine who went through small cell lung cancer, and he told me it was almost 2 years until he really started to think about what his wife and family had been through. So we include the caregivers with the idea that we think they have a big story to tell and a lot to add to the overall tale. Our first trip is comprised right now of 7 people, 4 of whom have been chosen. We're looking at 2 caregivers in those slots on the first trip for exactly that reason.
That's amazing. And really, cancer is something that affects not just the individual, but to your point, the whole family, the whole community, and just having that impact.
Well, and it goes to, I think, the way we live our lives, and that's where travel comes in. A travel is this amazing bubble of possibility. Anything can happen if you're open to it. And it gets you out of your comfort zone, out of your rut, and you can see the world with fresh eyes. And that's part of the point behind all this is that you're not going with your spouse or significant other. You're going by yourself. This is for you, and this trip is about you. So, what do you want to experience?
I love on your website that you reference that one way to heal is to experience other cultures and learn their wisdom around healing as well. And maybe share with us, what does that mean, or where have you seen that, or maybe your own personal experience that you can apply that to?
I think one of the things I'd like to see coming out of Cancer Road Trip for everybody is an awareness of what I call our matrix. What are the things we think on a daily basis? What do we eat? Where does our food come from? What do we do? What's the energy around us like? Do we have a spiritual dimension to our lives? I think that those things combine to be incredibly important, not only in terms of the quality of our life, but certainly in terms of the quality of our health. And they apply to all of us, and they are elements that we can actually control. And I think as we look at different cultures, we see very different ways of living, different approaches to healing, different approaches to life. And a film series allows you to pick and choose what would you like, what resonates with you, what you don't like, leave behind. But what you do like, well, take it out and play with it a little bit. See what you can do with it.
Pat, tell us about the film series. Where can the audience find out more? Where can they watch the film series?
The best place to go is the website. We're looking at releasing our first two episodes, hopefully the end of next year, actually. So the best thing to do is to sign up at cancerroadtrip.com. You get an email just with notifications of the podcast. We don't inundate you in any way. And that will be the best means for getting information for the trip. Our first travelers for the trip are being chosen partly to represent a very diverse group of experiences and people. And also they're people who are active on social media, who are willing to do TV interviews and things like that. After the first group, we'll be opening this up to everybody around the world, where you can, through a video application process, you can apply to go on the trip. If you go, wow, great. But if you don't go, you still get to live vicariously through the people that do. And you can always sign up for the next trip, which we'll be announcing shortly after that.
Pat, also, for those who love someone with cancer, someone who has perhaps been recently diagnosed, what's your advice to those people who are also afraid or concerned, unsure, all of the things, all those different emotions that, they may not be the ones that actually have been diagnosed, but it has also changed their lives. How can they be supportive, and what kind of support do they need?
That's a really good question. I would say to anybody, it's so difficult. Nobody knows what to do or say. And no matter what you do or say, it's just awkward. I would say don't give advice, but be there. Just be there. Text, email, give a call, check in, see how you can, rather than seeing how you can help, offer to do specific things. Do you need a ride to chemo? Can I pick up some groceries for you? Things like that, so that it's a yes/no answer, and you're not putting the burden of asking for something on the person with cancer. It is very difficult, and there is no good way to know how to be a good friend or a good spouse or partner through this. I think you just have to be honest and show up, and don't be afraid of being afraid.
When you talk about reimagining wellness, which is another theme kind of coming through in your blog, I think about what you just said about how the culture plays such an important role in how you think about wellness, about the nutrition and the spirituality and the mindset and all of those different pieces. How has that impacted your own journey, Pat? Like, where have you seen yourself personally make shifts in those different areas to kind of help you reimagine your own definition of wellness?
Oh, I've made major shifts. I was very motivated. They tell you have incurable cancer. You're like, no, I don't. I'm not accepting that. I think early on, one of the most powerful books I read, and I would recommend it to everybody, it's written by David Servan Schreiber, who's an MD, PhD, and it's called Anti-Cancer, A New Way of Life. And actually, he has a great story. He was a young, aggressive professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and he was running a brain scanning experiment. And one of his subjects didn't show up, so he went through the scanner, and that's how he discovered he had a brain tumor. So it started a year of just brutal treatment. His marriage fell apart. He couldn't work. I mean, his life just totally disintegrated. And at the end of the year, he asked his oncologist, well, what do I do now? And the oncologist said, well, go back to your life. So he went back to a life of fast food, Coke on the fly, and his brain tumor came back. And this time he decided to go on a worldwide quest for what creates health from a very scientific point of view, since that was his background. And it's an absolutely remarkable book. And it's a book that influenced me enormously because that and some studies by Dean Ornish at UCSF really pointed to the fact that we have a lot of control over a lot of elements in our life, but it's up to us to make those changes. Changes in terms of healthy diet. I started a meditation practice that I don't know how I could have lived without it. Physical fitness, connection with others. These are things that really play directly into your health.
And then there's travel.
There's travel.
And then there's travel, right? And it's something that clearly is important to you and that you think is potentially very important to someone who has been diagnosed with cancer, who is on the other side of cancer, who's beaten it, is in remission. But tell us why. I mean, why is travel important?
I always call it a bubble of possibility. You're removed from everything that you know. You're very present. You're probably more intensely present when you're traveling than you are in your day-to-day life. And with that presence becomes an open mind, hopefully. And that leads to adventure. I mean, one of the things I won't say learned about myself, but confirmed about myself going through this COVID is that I have to have a little adventure in my life. It is absolutely essential. I just think it's so much fun to see new things, discover new things, integrate new things into your life. And if you can get into that type of habit, evolution becomes much easier than making dramatic changes.
I can't help but think of my brother, who at 19 was diagnosed with leukemia. And the reason that we found that diagnosis is he actually had a stroke that paralyzed him on one side of his body. And as they were trying to determine the cause of the stroke, discovered that he had leukemia. So it was several years of going back and forth. And I ultimately ended up doing a bone marrow donation for him. But right before that happened and he went into the hospital, he said, I want to go for a ride. I go, what do you mean? You want to go for a ride? He goes, just put me in the car and drive and put on some music and let's just drive for hours. I don't even care where. And I just remember him finally looking relaxed and happy and free. And that's what he shared with me. He said, I really, truly feel alive when I'm on a journey somewhere, even if I don't know where it is. That's the feeling of being alive. It's just knowing that you're on a journey. And so as I hear you talk, Pat, it's just bringing back these memories for me. And I appreciate you sharing all of this and sharing this perhaps with those other folks who, this resonates with as well.
Well, I've come to see life as a road trip, quite honestly. There are twists and turns and bumps and ups and downs, and everybody goes through this, not just people with cancer. And it becomes a question of, can you view life as an adventure? Can you find possibility in it? And I think if you can have a really interesting ride. That certainly is one of my goals.
Our guest today here on Wander to the Edge is Pat Wetzel. She's very inspiring. Her story is is inspiring. The platform, all the projects, so many projects. We're just kind of getting to know a few of the things that she does and has been active in. Her story is very interesting, and you need to get to know her, this platform, and the opportunities that are available now to you and to the people you love through cancerroadtrip.com. Put that up on the screen here, cancerroadtrip.com, to find out more information. And Pat, really, what's the invitation now to the viewers? Is we talked before we started the broadcast, who watches this? It's largely that social media travel tribe, people who've grouped together because they have a passion for travel. A lot of times the reasons why they love travel are maybe different. Their stories are all different. And then there's you right in the middle with of this group with a passion and a heart and this purpose that shines through. And today we're getting to know you, but we've known about you for so long. Tell us what the invitation is to that group watching, getting to know you today, getting to know your platform, some of them perhaps for the first time. What's the invitation that you make to them?
Come on over the website. We have lots of things going on. We have video, a lot of photography. Just join the trip and adventure. You don't have to have cancer to enjoy a road trip. And I would also invite you to come to Bump in the Road, which is our podcast. That reaches an audience way beyond cancer. And the stories are just amazing. Each and every story is so inspiring in its own right. I look forward to doing Bump every week, and I learn so much from it. I learn so much from the people who come on, and I learn a lot. I am learning a lot, actually, about how important it is to come to a talk with somebody with a very open mind and let it go. You don't know where the conversation will go. And I think Bump in the Road will generate a book later this year. I'm not sure what form it's taking. I'm mulling it over. It'll be much more than just excerpts from different people, although I'm sure there'll be some of that. But I think it's going to be a lot about my learning experiences with doing a podcast and what that implies for all of us every day in terms of communicating.
And where's that podcast available? Where should people go to find it?
It's on all the major podcast platforms, iTunes, Google Play, Libsyn, iHeartRadio, any podcast platform you go to, it'll most likely be there.
Speaking of podcast, I think another question that people have, just in general, looking at everything that you've accomplished, how do you get started with a podcast? I see a lot of people talking about wanting to start a podcast, on Twitter. They're going back and forth. I think I want to do this, but how do you get started?
I don't know about you, but it was mildly terrifying. I didn't know if I'd be able to find enough material. So I did all the homework on the technical aspect of it, decided what I wanted to do on that end. And then I started making lists and talking to people like, would you be on this podcast? And this summer, I did 3 to 4 podcasts per week to build up some inventory so that I knew I had a little bit of breathing space in terms of the rest of the year. I think the key to a podcast is, do you love it? Do you love it enough that you can show up every week or however often you broadcast and be there? Because it's a lot of work. You have to find people. You have to track them down. If they have a book, you're probably going to read it. You're going to look at their website. You do a lot of research on your end. And I think you have to ask yourself, one, do you want to do this? Do you want to take it on? And secondly, will you love it enough that you'll keep it going?
Yeah, I know that we put a lot of work into this, and it helps having 2 people.
Yeah.
So Adam and I go through every list, and Adam likes to make lists of things for me to do. And I keep explaining to him that he can't tell me what to do, but then I do it anyway. It's a lot of work for just one person to kind of take on.
Yeah, it has been a lot. I've gotten a pretty good system down. I'm actually just fascinated by the people that come on. It's not work. It really is fun in that regard. And I've developed all these new friendships with people all over the world as a result of the podcast. And their stories each and every story is just amazing.
Indeed. I mean, I think we feel the same way here about Wander to the Edge, it's given us the opportunity to meet so many great people. And the podcast revolution. Now, I'm a radio guy. I've been in the radio business since before the internet and before the podcasting revolution, and sort of watched it develop through the years. And one of the really great things about it is it has made this kind of thing easy enough to do, or I should say, accessible, right? I mean, it isn't easy, but it's made it something where you can get the message out. You can build the network, you can meet new people and share that experience with others. And I know in your case, you have a very meaningful purpose and a meaningful platform. And I certainly encourage everyone to go onto their favorite podcast platform and look up Bump in the Road. Bump in the Road. I'll pull that up on the screen here in case you're watching this. Podcast that you need to look for is Bump in the Road. And again, to find out more information about Pat Wetzel and this remarkable platform, helpful platform, very important. Be sure to look all that up at cancerroadtrip.com. Pat, what else does the audience need to know about cancerroadtrip.com and all the different projects you have and your platform? What do we need to be sure not to forget?
To have some fun along the way. I mean, that is what this is about. Life should be just a glorious road trip. And I hope some of that comes through in a heartfelt and soulful way on the site, through the films and the interviews. I think that for me, I've always lived kind of a fun and interesting life. I spent years racing high-performance sailplanes and had amazing experiences with all that. But cancer has really focused me on how fleeting, how quick life is. And it has really caused me to get rid of a lot of peripheral things in my life and tune in on the beauty and magic of life. And I hope I would share that with everybody. You have to have cancer to find that joy in life. And if you have to stop the merry-go-round that you're on and go stare at your navel for a few days and contemplate things, or whatever you have to do it. Life is far too short to waste it on meaningless endeavors. It really is.
I have a couple follow-up questions, if we have another minute. One, I want to also talk about the fact that it's not just road trips for you. You're a pilot as well. Okay, so what's up with that?
It was a midlife thing.
Okay.
I was out in Calistoga, California. This was back in the early this would have been around 1990. And back then there was an airport right in the middle of town. And I was up there for the mud baths and wine and that kind of thing. And I saw this airport and I wandered over and they had glider rides. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting, but it didn't really wow me. And I decided to stay for a glider ride the next day. So I went up and it was nice. It was a nice experience, but it, again, didn't stop my world or anything. I went back east. I was living in Pennsylvania at the time, and I heard about a group of lawyers that were flying gliders out of the small private airfield on weekends. So I tracked them down and I invited myself out for a 3-day weekend, and the rest was history. I was totally hooked. Oh my God, totally hooked. I just took every opportunity I could to fly. And finally, one day I showed up at the airport. Sam, who was my instructor, he was a World War II naval aviator. They had pledged the planes for an air show of some sort. So I showed up and the plane that was set up just for me, it was a little 126, was not available. And I was so angry. I just wanted to fly. The sky was full of these beautiful cumulus clouds. And I knew there was another flying club somewhere down the road because I heard them on the radio. And I always called them the Sky Gods. These guys flew big, sophisticated planes. They competed to fly in world competitions. And they would go hundreds of miles. And I was like, wow, beyond me, certainly. So I got in the car and I drove down the road and I showed up at the other airport. And it was not very welcoming. There's a big sign that says, "Go away, don't come." I was the only woman on the field that ended up having a nice plane. It was not the most welcoming environment, but I was so hooked. I had to fly. So I joined on the spot. utterly oblivious to everything, not knowing what I was getting into, which is how the best adventures always occur. And then I found out the flying situation there was no better than it had been at the other airport, and I really needed to buy an airplane. So that set me on a quest to buy an airplane, which is a set of stories unto itself. And that in turn ultimately is what led to my moving from the East Coast to the West Coast. I took my sailplane cross country in 1995 and decided to move out to the Tahoe area because it's one of the best places in the world to soar.
Incredible. So my second follow-up question, and it's for both of you. When you're planning a road trip, right? Like for me, I have to make a playlist ahead of time of at least like 60 to 70 songs. I have to have Twizzlers. Okay. And I'm ready for my road trip. Adam, when you're planning a road trip, what do you have to have?
Planning a road trip, definitely have to have some music. And I tend to categorize my playlists. I don't really have a road trip playlist, but it depends on maybe the mood that I'm in, but I've got the different types of playlists, right? And so if I'm in the mood for the country music or for hip hop or oldies, whatever it may be, I can pull up the playlist. So you got to have your playlist. I would say.
You still have your Edge of Adventure playlist out on Spotify too?
So I do. I do have. So I have the Edge of Adventure playlist, which I tend to associate that with the show, right? So the songs that I have in there are all, to me, fit the genre of the show somehow, of the Edge of Adventure. So yeah, so I definitely have that. I have to have my sunglasses and I have to have my hat. Otherwise, I'm apparently not going anywhere.
Pat, have you seen the infamous hat that Adam wears when he's on an adventure?
I've watched his films, but I'm not connecting with the hat. Do you have it there?
I don't. Well, you know what? I don't have it here. Way to go, Zan. You should have told me I could have had it. I do have the sunglasses.
There you go.
Yes, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
But not the hat's inside, hanging up on the wall, where just remind me of inspiration and places I want to go. But yes, it's all part of the things I have to be ready to go on a road trip, and it's always nice, right? I mean, we're back into the regarding the COVID era that we're living in, and the things that we've lost maybe and haven't done as much of, but the road trip, getting out, seeing the world. For my entire life, being in the car for a long period of time actually doesn't bother me. I like the experience of driving and seeing the terrain. And so while it's nice to fly from one point to the other and you get there quicker and all of that, the actual road trip gives you the perspective of knowing what's between here and there.
I agree. And it gives you freedom too. You have freedom to explore.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right, Matt, what's in your road trip preparation process or kit?
Car with full tank of gas. Let's go.
Okay.
Passport if needed. My cameras. I always bring my cameras. I never used. Photography is a relatively new thing for me, but I'm really hooked on that, and so I always throw a camera or two in the car as well.
Yeah.
That's a great list. That's a great list. Well, Pat, you are an amazing person, and I already knew that before we talked
today.
Oh, you're
far too kind.
No, I knew it. I mean, before we talked today, it was very clear what the type of person that you are, but this is the advantage of the podcast. This is the advantage of being able to get to know people like this, and your warmth and your sense of calm and determination. I mean, it all shines through at cancerroadtrip.com for more information, and certainly encourage our audience to check it out and to be a part of it.
Thank you both. This is just great fun today. I am so grateful that you reached out, and it's so nice. I follow you both, obviously, but it's so nice to actually meet in person, if you will.
Oh, well, thank you. This is what we love. Like you said, when you love podcasts and you love connecting with people, this is what you do.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, looks like we are wrapping up the program. Another great opportunity to meet a great person. So get to know Pat and her platform, all that she does, so many different things, and check in with her and get involved. Get involved. Look for the way that you need to be involved, and take a cancer road trip. And do not be afraid. Be brave, and just enjoy that. She's a great person to be on that journey with. So again, for more information, cancerroadtrip.com.
And don't forget to join us every Saturday here on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. It's Wander to the Edge, which is the edge of adventure, and Where Gals Wander. Go check both of those out too. As we do this every week, friends talking travel right here on Wander to the Edge.